Smaller companies are more affected, and that is where this below 10 and high more than 10 divide actually works. The compliances are lower for less than 10, so that has the perverse effect of not wanting to grow. The medium enterprises are the ones who are operating at a much higher quality and are in principle have the potential to compete globally. So I think the advice is very clear. MSMEs should be out there. This is the time to look for buyers. They are looking. Find them. Future means we are going to be Viksit. So you must build for a Viksit quality.
We have with us today Dr. Arvind Virmani, senior economist and member Niti Aayog, who will tell us more on why small businesses are integral to India's economic growth and how they can aim to become global champions. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Virmani. It's great to have you with us here.
Thank you.
First of all, like addressing the ground realities, the MSME sector plays a crucial role in the country's economic growth. But despite various government schemes, they find it challenging to scale up. Why do you think that is the case?
Well, we've got to remember that there are kind of two segments to the MSME sector. Of course, there are many, but it's useful to divide into two, which is given by the laws. So there are SMEs, which are basically 10 or more workers, and there are what I would call household and micro enterprises. We call them micro, but within it, the household part is much larger. 70 to 80 to 90% of that, which are just one person enterprises. So it's kind of important to keep those two distinctions in mind when we discuss this. But there are several points which affect all of them. Of course, as we all know, that these employ a larger part of the non-agricultural workforce. So they are clearly very important from that perspective. The SMEs also are major exporters, but again, those have limitations in the sense of what globally they might be called niche exporters and involved in traditional exports. So one I would say is basic infrastructure. Which applies to both these two categories which I mentioned. Often we will come and discuss the medium enterprises, which are the top, but the general point is that just the basic infrastructure in industrial areas. I mean, I went to an industrial area in Delhi 20 years ago. It was pathetic. I plan to go and see whether there's much improvement, but basic water, roads, drainage, cleanliness, sewage systems, and kind of sustained maintenance of the area. When we think of urban development and cleanliness, we think of residential areas. But to get enterprises of high quality and functioning at the levels we expect, the basic infrastructure has to be there. They cannot be worrying about overflow of sewage pipes every other day. If they are getting people from outside to buy things, or they are getting an export order. So that is one. The second is land use laws. I just mentioned two and move to the last point. Laws, rules. So one, for example, the conversion of agricultural land into industrial land. How will you get entrepreneurs in rural areas if that process is very difficult? Because and you can see that the states which allow it, a person in a village can say, okay, I will not do like agriculture, let me try some manufacturing. So and the third is demand risk. A lot of small enterprises are single product, single buyer thing, so the risk is higher. So when we say, oh, why cannot they get credit as easily? Because they are more risky, because of their small scale, they are restricted. So if that one buyer says, no, I don't need your product anymore, that's it. Okay, so where is the credit going to be repaid? And finally, the critical one, which is overlooked, is the skills, the level of skills. And of course, just mention that at the lowest level, what I said, HME, there are schemes for all these things, but the HME one is very important because it's new. It not thought of before, the Vishwakarma scheme. So the skilling part has been neglected, for decades. But I think it's getting more attention, and one of my efforts has been to how to make sure the quality of that whole thing, the kind of knowledge and information that they get is improved.
On a similar note, it's a large portion of small businesses in India operate informally. So, do you see the informality as a symptom of overregulation or more due to lack of incentives to formalize?
So this links us back to those two categories which I said. Generally, you'll recall that the formal sector is kind of of course, we are talking about non-agriculture and more focus on manufacturing and industry here rather than services. And that is the ASI. Okay, so ASI captures what is the formal sector, which is roughly what I told you, the 10 or more workers versus 10 or less. So the less than 10 is the informal. Again, efforts have been made, clearly if laws, rules, regulations are more complicated, procedures are more complicated, they spend more cost and effort, and we'll come back to that aspect. But the efforts have been made to simplify the laws, rules, digitize the forms, make compliance. But as I have asserted in many times in the last several decades, that the jungle of controls which was built up, it just doesn't go away by changing the law. We have to dig into every little thing. There's a whole structure which was built over 30 years of wrong policies, I would say, which is very hard to reverse. It's not just a matter of laws, rules. It's also how the whole system operates. So one has to. The analogy of a jungle. One has to go through every area and cut the jungle, and that's difficult. So one is trying to do that. From the perspective of the small person, there are kind of fixed costs of compliance, and therefore, if you produce a small amount, the unit cost is higher. If you may think of it, it's almost like a product cost, but it's a cost of compliance. So smaller companies are more affected, and that is where this below 10 and high more than 10 divide actually works. The compliances are lower for less than 10, so that has the perverse effect of not wanting to grow. Okay, so in that threshold, they just divide into two units. If they are going to go 11, they will just divide up, and that keeps eventually in the longer term keeps you from attaining scale and getting, for example, a common marketing person or something. Because you keep dividing, you will still have that cost problem which I mentioned, a little less but still there. And the second type of cost is most of these, including SMEs, are owner managers, except for the highest, what we call the medium. They are owner managers, right? So their time is limited. So if they have to spend more time on compliance, they have less time for other things, including innovation and other things. So there is a challenge, and the only way, the best way, and perhaps the only way to do it is reduce that time and other costs of compliance. And that has been the effort of the government, but it's a kind of long road, and it also has to stretch down to the states. It's not just we can sit in Delhi and do all this. Every state kind of has to do its bit, because much of this compliance actually happens at the ground level, at the local level actually. But that is the state's kind of purview.
So, when it comes to Niti Aayog's role, what is Niti Aayog considering to ease the transition from informal to formal structures for micro and small enterprises?
So, one of the important things, as I said, again, there is a kind of, there is of course the difference, but information and knowledge is critical, right? So, for example, if you don't have a knowledge about something you can do better, you will not look for it. So, so somebody else who you trust has to tell you. So that is one of the roles of government, right, of Niti in a way, is to get information they are completely unaware of and therefore not searching for it, uh, and go and make that available at that level. So that is one, but also that also applies to information to states, to officials. One state is doing better, but the other state may not be aware how it is done, right? So one of the roles is to see, okay, what are the good things being done in XYZ state, and give it to ABC. Obviously, it depends on their own willingness and their own motivation. You can't force anything down anybody's throat. In our system, we have independent states. So yeah, so one of the things which Niti is doing is what follows from the directions given by the Honorable Prime Minister several months ago, which is to see how we can define the strengths and weaknesses of different states in attracting investment in infrastructure and manufacturing. So once that index is built, it's now in phase 2, and will be completed in the months to come. But once that index is there, if a state which is not doing so well is really wants to do, then it will have some kind of a roadmap that, okay, we are weak in these three types of efforts, and if they really want, they can improve those and therefore attract more investment and attract more FDI. So that is one important step. As I said, it fits with our overall perspective of getting information and knowledge from the right place to the right place, so that the states have that information, and then obviously it will depend on their own motivation, their own goals, etc.
This brings me to my next question, which is also about Niti Aayog's latest report on medium enterprises and how it kind of it highlights their vital contributions to India's GDP, and how it can help scale the economy, the Indian economy. So a lot of times their contribution is not really considered, like micro enterprises what is spoken about more. How can the potential of medium enterprises be fully harnessed?
Right. So I'll say that it's important because the medium enterprises are the ones which can go to the next level. So what we have analyzed is that there are quality chains, right? So the lowest level have a poor quality chain. What does that mean? That means the materials, the equipment, the tools, the skill levels of those who run these things, the knowledge and information of the owner manager, all that it is of a certain quality. The medium enterprises are the ones who are operating at a much higher quality and are in principle have the potential to compete globally. So for example, I'll tell you a recent report we did on the Niti did on hand tools. Okay, so there were a whole bunch of hand tool manufacturers. We looked into exactly these sort of things which you have been asking me, and then there was one or two people who were already exporting. They are in a whole different category, and those are the ones which will be this new medium sector. Of course, there is the startup sector which is a separate issue we can go in, but they will also be the stars. But medium enterprises have that capability of upgrading that quality chain because the gap is not so large. When you're talking about the normal, whether it's a food processing chain or any other industry, engineering industry, there are companies making engineer goods who are in that top quality chain. While there will be others who will do chalta hai type of work, which is okay for ordinary type of stuff. So basically it's right through. That's the important point we have to remember, that it is the materials they use, because that material then has to be processed by certain types of tools and equipment and has to have the skills to operate that and test it and so on. So there is a whole quality chain, and that is feasible in the medium enterprise. They are the ones, you recall the budget, there was thing about labor intensive industries being encouraged to export more. So one would look at this medium sector in that context, that they are both labor intensive and have the potential quality and competitiveness to compete globally.
So do you think medium enterprises can lead the Indian economy to scale when we speak about them?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the ones who are capable of scaling. And then, of course, other, one was that 10 barrier. There is, of course, another 100, 300 worker barrier, etc. All those have to be simplified and made less onerous, so to say.
Right. I want to speak a bit about about digital infrastructure or digital literacy.
Mhm.
How much of a lack of that is a barrier to scaling for small businesses,
Yeah.
especially in rural and semi-urban areas?
Absolutely. So we kind of moved down from the medium to the small, let's say, and also micro, some of the micro. I think there's an important thing. I visited recently. I visited Batinda and Hisar. So, and this is something I came across. The lack of information, even about schemes to benefit them, which are already in existence, they were not aware of. They were not aware of the ONDC platform. So they have difficulties selling goods, but they don't know they can be on the ONDC platform. They are not aware of it. So somehow I think that's it. So one of the things I learned is that they use, let's say, more use because their children, they use WhatsApp channels. Okay, so these are all new things which we have to kind of learn and use to give knowledge, to make them participate in skilling, which will then be needed. Like I said, when you improve the quality, there's a whole chain of things you have to do. You have to educate yourself. You have to get skilled people, and when the government also comes in, the government must help generate these skills. You had asked, is it only regulation or is it? No, there are many things connected with skills which are very important also. And this is one example of that. So the digital part, perhaps for some people, when you go further down, it's literacy. For some people, is what channels they are using and what the state governments or central government departments are using. So this is a whole new area which I think everybody is learning about, but the question is valid one.
Again, R&D is also a significant parameter when it comes to innovation, and India is holding one of the lowest R&D spends when compared to other international counterparts. So, how can such gaps be bridged, in your view, to foster the development of MSMEs in general and medium units in particular?
Yeah, so the conventional analysis, which is fine to the degree it goes, shows you that the government and public sector do enough research compared to peers, much more actually if you take by per capita, but then we want to compete with the upper part. So, but the private sector is not doing so. In my view, it really doesn't serve the purpose to say do more, etc. So what is the reason? Okay, well, being a think tanker, that's my job, right? I have to find an economic reason why that is happening. So I have a basic, simple approach to it. There is a technology frontier. Indian companies, we have talked about whole MSMEs, right? The whole range of quality chains. Many of them operate well within that frontier. Those who are exporters are close to the frontier. So it's really a two-stage thing. Can you produce export quality goods and compete with them? Otherwise, what's the point of doing research, right? It's not some one-man show or somebody who's running with 10 people is going to do research, right? For what purpose? I've just told you that they don't even have the information of stuff which is available out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so it has to be somebody who is competing in the export market. Otherwise, I mean, if I was there, I wouldn't even think of doing R&D. Why should I do when I am just competing with everybody else like me? So the competitive system and export competitiveness is critical for R&D to happen. So if there is too much protection, okay, in an industry, I wouldn't expect anybody to do R&D. Okay, so the first thing is, what is the incentive from their side to do R&D? Why do you do R&D? If you feel that competitor is going to get something better, a product or a process which will reduce the cost and he'll be able to wipe you out, right? Or he'll produce a new product and get all the market away from you, right? So that is the basic driver of private sector R&D. So firstly, there have to be conditions which produce that, okay? So that there is an incentive to move at least to the frontier and then do. Now, this does not really apply. So where is it? Let's take the other extreme now. Where is it that we are close to the frontier? Everybody recognizes, for example, that in four-wheelers, we are at the frontier, okay, from whoever we have talked to. That's where the R&D is occurring. It is happening. Now, the issue is, what can the government do to facilitate it? And this is the controversial issue. I personally believe that we should bring back the R&D subsidy. Now, there was a bad experience 10 years ago, 20 years ago, where it was thought that people were just misusing this double deduction subsidy for R&D. And there are solutions to that, but many people just go, oh, bad experience hua hai, nahi karenge. But what I say is, there's a whole new world out there. You've got digital, you've got monitoring, you've got so many other things. For example, one simple example, just to throw off an idea, you could just focus it on countries, sectors where you know we are on the frontier, because then those are the guys who actually have this motivation. So you could say, okay, we will pick out these 10 high-tech sectors or whatever, and then see which are the firms on it objectively by a criteria, and then say, okay, these sectors with this type of activity will all get the thing if they do R&D. That way you don't have every Tom, Dick and Harry saying I'm doing R&D when they're not doing anything.
Right.
So finding a solution, giving a focused subsidy to encourage it, I think is still very important. Many countries across the world give incentives for R&D. We withdrew it because of bad experience. I think we need to reevaluate.
Okay, and moving on in terms of the revised definition of the MSME sector, do you think that can help in achieving some of the things that we've spoken about, like higher efficiencies of scale, tech upgradation, and access to capital? And also, if there's any disadvantage in your view?
Right. So you recall you mentioned the incentives go away. Certain types of incentives are linked to scale. So obviously, if you change the definition, that part of scaling then will occur. So, for example, if the cutoff was lower, if there are a lot of companies at that level are then dividing into two, that will not happen till they reach that upper stage. So, absolutely right. The scale can be improved with the rise in limits to the extent that there are incentives or the other side, non-incentives or whatever, linked to that scale. Okay. So, yes, definitely they will occur. Now, in this game, what the critical point is that they should be able to get to what, for an economist again, is what we call minimum efficient scale. So you want that limit to be higher than the minimum efficient scale, because otherwise you could say, why have that limit also? But the key point is it should be above the minimum. Then it's fine. You can have it right there. Of course, you don't know exactly what the MES is. So once they attain MES, then that scale is good enough. Okay, that's the whole definition of minimum efficient scale. So yes, raising the limit above the minimum efficient scale is good. It will promote scale and greater competitiveness.
Okay, and since we are on the topic of scale, many Asian countries have successfully scaled up their SME sectors. So what lessons can India learn from, say, Vietnam, Indonesia or China? Yeah,
that's a very important question. So what is the lesson? So one of the most important, there may be many lessons, but and China, of course, being a big country, has many lessons for everybody. But if you take Southeast Asia in general, the big lessons is they went all out there to attract FDI and laid out the red carpet for them to set up supply chain. This didn't happen in 1 year or 2 years, but they consistently, first they attracted the FDI. Of course, new FDI is coming all the time, but those guys who were there, and now I've talked to individual companies who have operated in China, for example, who are now in India. But then when a large company came in which has supply chains in US or whatever at that time, they just made sure they laid out the red carpet to get them to build that supply chain there. And they provided all the help. And that is what has transformed them. That is what led them to leapfrog our per capita income. So all the Southeast Asian countries who did that and did it successfully now have much higher gap in per capita income than us. So that is the big lesson, that FDI and supply chains, if you can get them, even in this period of turmoil, it's a different world. But if you can get them, that will be a huge driver of medium sector, small sector. Small sector here will be more the startups. There are already some amazing startups which I was amazed at. I heard about in the last year or two, which can produce really sophisticated stuff, but it's a small item. It may be, you have a huge plant making all kinds of things, but there's some critical tool, okay, which has to be replaced everything. They can make it. I mean, you import it from Germany or Japan, but they can make it, okay. So there are these startups. So startup is small, okay. Then there are medium companies who you say, okay, I will need so many million of these parts. Can you make it? They can make it. So that is what happened. So, but they had to encourage. They had to make sure, if that company said, okay, either give me a huge piece of land. If they couldn't give a huge piece of land, they said, okay, we will give it to you across the city, right? Where we'll make land for you. So being helpful. They said skilling, that, okay, skilling, can the government help in the skilling? Yes, the government said, okay, we can do some education, but the special skills, why don't you set up a skilling center? Okay, so basically making it easy for them to set the supply chain. Everybody will benefit. Okay, the medium industry, the small industry, of course, different ones from different. It's not like one company will benefit everybody. So, but if you have 100 companies who do this across this country, we have 28 states. What I have said, only not joking, but if every state brings in one anchor investors, you'll transform the every state in the next 10 years. Manufacturing will be on the way to Atmanirbhar manufacturing. So that is the lesson. Very clear lesson.
Yeah, so I mean, lot of, as you mentioned, lot of red carpet treatment and lot of support, which help to mobilize such.
It can be done. It is not difficult. It's the motivation of the states. You're back to the states. Okay. Let me give you a concrete example. Single window clearance, where the single window actually is working. Those are the states where are getting this stuff. They are getting the anchor investor. They are getting the FDI. That's why I didn't want to name the states.
Right. And you spoke about manufacturing as well. So India has not been able to capitalize as much as it had hoped in the China +1 strategy. How can there be a turnaround, especially when we have strengths such as a large market and demographic dividend on its side?
It is not true that we have not benefited. Okay, we have benefited in the 2 or 3 best studies I've seen, which come from World Bank, etc., show that in terms of looked at from the US point of view, the tariffs imposed in 2018 in 4 tranches. India is the top 3 to 5 gainer. Some studies show we are 3rd, others show we are 5th. Okay, and how do they, in simple terms, US imports from China have gone down. They have gone up from countries including Taiwan is always Vietnam is always mentioned. They are clearly in all these studies the top gainer. We are the 3rd largest gainer. That means the increase in US imports from India as a result of their tariffs on China has been the third highest, or in few studies, fifth highest. So we have gained. Now, the question is, how can we gain more? That is the real issue. Okay? Because given our size, we should be gaining 10 times Vietnam, let's say. I mean, just a number pulled out. So that is really the issue. And that is connected to what I said about FDI and supply chain. But what is the policy we are pursuing? That also is very clear. The policy is having FTAs with countries which are the source of FDI and demand for manufacturers. That is what the supply chain is all about. Why do we want supply chain? Not for the sake of itself, because that anchor investor will use the supply chain to supply to somebody. No? He's not just producing to throw away. He has to produce to supply some demand. So that is what is driving it. And how will we drive it? How will we make sure that tens of companies come? Is through these FTAs. Okay. So the FTA with UK is done. UK is one of the larger importers of manufactured goods in the world. US, EU are the top two if they treat EU as a single entity. And therefore the FTAs is what is part of our strategy to achieve this comprehensive and much bigger shift in the next 5 to 10 years. Not just be satisfied being number 3 or 5. We should be number 1 by a big stretch. And just to give you specific, again, if it is too theoretical, in the European market, Vietnam has a FTA with Europe, and it immediately gets an advantage of between 10 and 20% for products. That advantage will go. So our exports to EU will certainly increase.
What should the MSME sector's strategy be in the backdrop of recent tariff and trade developments? And how can they safeguard themselves in the light of such an unpredictable economic landscape?
We know that some tariff was imposed, then it was suspended. Okay, on India, but not on China. And from all the information which came in the next couple of weeks, month or so after that, was that a lot of US companies were desperately looking for Indian suppliers of the same products. Okay, so I think the opportunity is much greater than the threat. So in engineering goods, in household items, in many others, there were reports, textiles, and many other things. They were looking for suppliers in India. So I think the advice is very clear. MSMEs should be out there. This is the time to look for buyers. They are looking. Find them. I mean, again, government is trying to do its little bit with the Honorable Prime Minister has talked about this mart, international mart. It is so difficult. There is no platform where a foreign buyer can just say, okay, I want to buy, let's say, toasters from India. And to build some kind of platform or a mart where you could say, okay, here are 3 toaster manufacturers and let me contact them. Okay. So government is again trying to do, but the MSMEs who feel they want to expand, this is the opportunity.
Lastly, MSME Day is also coming up on June 27th. So it becomes a very relevant time to ask this question, that what is your vision for Indian MSMEs over the next decade, and what must change for them to become global champions?
See, vision is a philosophical thing. The Prime Minister has said so many times that everybody should have their own vision. So I think it is not for me, being a Niti member, to give a vision for MSMEs. The vision for MSMEs will come from the MSME department. Okay, they have a vision. As you and the idea was that each department, each ministry should develop their visions of the things they are responsible for. Each state, we already now have 5, 6, 7 states who have developed their own visions. We are helping those who want our help in this. Many of them, they can do it themselves. They are getting the help of consultants, etc. So really, I don't think having that's the whole change from planning. In the old days of planning, when I was here, we used to have this plan for the chemical industry, for this and this, that, and that was it, right? And then you allocated some money to the public sector, never to the private. So the vision is what, the vision will come from them. What we have talked about is the policy analysis, which you have asked questions on regulation, on what are the issues. We have mentioned basic ground level infrastructure, land policies, electricity pricing. Those are the things which will empower them in a way, right? If they have more time for doing things. Now, MSME, we just said, the MSMEs who are capable, who have the time, should be going out there, meaning even just searching on the internet or something to find buyers. So it's really about policies rather than detailed thing, which you really, MSME ministry would be the right. The spirit of it is very clear, that two things. One is that we must not think only of the current, that there is X demand and we will meet X demand. We must think of the future, where we want to be and build for the future. That is one idea which kind of comes from the PM. And second is that future means we are going to be Viksit. So you must build for a Viksit quality. It cannot be satisfied with where we are today. If I'm producing something which is, 30% inferior to, let's say, German product or Japanese product in machinery, let's say, where they are the best. A machinery manufacturer must think that in 5 years or whenever we are Viksit, we must be of that quality. And you have to start doing that now. Okay, and that applies to MSMEs. That applies to the startups. Yes, okay. So the vision is the startups, in a sense, that is a vision, is that the startups will drive this push for higher quality, the frontier of the MSME sector. Yes, they are going to be the new MSMEs. And they are the ones who will transform productivity and growth. Yeah. And which is why so much emphasis has been placed on the startup infrastructure, the startup funding, the fund of funds, etc. And the fact that we are saying that we need more STEM type of technical people, because they are there. It's just a matter of connecting them into the system. Okay, and that is the vision. Actually, you're right. That is the vision. That is the future.
Right. So, building for the future, manufacturing, scale, and Atmanirbharta. MSMEs need to do all this and more and become global champions of the future. Thank you so much, Dr. Virmani, for joining us today and giving us those insights. I'm sure there will be many takeaways which the industry can adopt and adapt to. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.